as the Reddit Starship Porn Group quite enjoyed my Starbird Space Avenger picture the other night. I thought it would be rude of me not to put together this Starbird Space Intruder sooner than I'd anticipated, so I can do a quick rundown of this, and then when another auction arrives I should hopefully be able to look at more or less the whole Starbird range. And this one looks like it's got 1981 in the top left corner that someone's written on, and that's probably about right, I think, for when this came out. Now, you'll remember from the Avenger video, if you watched it, and I've still got the box here. So obviously this was the Avenger, and the Avenger is very bright white, quite a big thing. It splits in two, little sort of wing-mounted fighters, all that sort of good stuff. And it had infrared sensors on the front. Now, I'll just show you the back briefly here. And I figured out now that the Intruder was very much paired with, as you can see on the back here, the Space Avenger. And there was an earlier version of the Starbird, but the manual for the Intruder actually references that and makes it clear that they are not compatible with each other. But what I hadn't appreciated was that this actually interacts with the Space Avenger. Now, I haven't got enough batteries to run them simultaneously, but apparently if one of them shoots the other one, then they have a sort of I've been hit kind of functionality. So in the early 1980s, you could actually have proper actual space battles at significant range with these two. And that's a brilliant idea. You've got to love MB, haven't you? So I'm just looking at this, which is the little operator's manual you get with the Space Intruder, which happily came with the relatively. I had to bid for it. Little, there were a couple of other people in the bidding match, but I did manage to get it for quite a reasonable price. Its wings are a little bit wobbly. I'll show you in a moment, but what this basically says is that to duel with other ships, aim your photon beams at another Intruder or an Avenger. So if your friend had an Intruder, or if they had an Avenger, you could have a two-way contest going, basically. And it says, note, your ship, when hit by the beam from another Intruder or an Avenger, will react in the same manner. Intruders and Avengers do not interact with the original Starbird. And I know why that is, and it's because, as I think I'll confirm when it arrives, the original Starbird did not have the infrared detectors. It's got the photon beams, i.e. the two bulbs that light up at the front, but it didn't have the infrared sensors, so it can't do the sort of the target detection. But they're also very honest in that booklet, which made me smile. They're basically saying that if you don't have the target still, which I do have an example of, but if you don't have that, if you shoot it at a mirror, it'll have exactly the same effect. And I think my Avenger was doing that when I did my last video. I think it died quite rapidly. So I think as soon as the beams bounced off anything, it triggered its effect to sort of, power down effectively. So that's the box. And as you can see, like the other MB box, they're very big. You can't miss them on the shelf. They would have displayed brilliantly. And they would have been a doddle to stack if you're the owner of a shop. So again, it's quite smart on MB's part, because it's kind of like a board game box, which is, of course, is the other thing they're very well known for. So if I leave that there, and I'll bring this in, you will see that this is a very different beast to the Avenger. She's got big wings, but you will notice that her front is in fact identical to the Avengers, only in black, with an orange sticker on the front. I've compared them alongside each other, and the panelling and everything else is absolutely identical. And I think the innards are pretty much identical as well. You can see there. This is the sort of the element that contains the electronics. Now, the clever thing here is that they put these landing skis on. The landing skis actually fit onto the battery compartment lid. And they use that as their sort of their base and their slot. But you've also got this trigger mechanism here at the back, which you didn't have on the Avenger. The Avenger, you just hold onto its neck, and that's easy to do. But this works like this. Brace yourself if you're on headphones, okay? Headphones away from your head. Right. So, like the Avenger, it goes up and it goes down. Oops, there goes one of the wings. Just about see it firing. I think it's hitting something so quickly, it's actually turning itself off almost immediately. But it's alive. It's like the Avenger, 40 years on, and it's alive. Now, this is all of its wings. You can see it's. I think that the attachment here has snapped. I think that's supposed to be a bracket, but I've only got one half of it, so the wings aren't staying on terribly convincingly. But this was not a guaranteed mint in box kind of example. It was you know, in fairness, it was sold kind of as is. So I wasn't expecting necessarily great guns from it, but it works. And what it did have, as I've mentioned in my other video, is it had the bits for the Space Avenger in it as well. So that was a real plus. Now you can see she sits there quite nicely. The wings can go into different levels as well, though I suspect it's not going to work very well because the brackets are bust. But in theory, it would have held like that, something like that. And it can also fold over, so it can kind of sort of fold that way as well. But obviously, this isn't quite as convincing as it would have been back in its day, because it's not. It's definitely lost. There's definitely a break line here, so they would have had more of a bracket to hold it in place. But it's still, there's still enough left there for it to sort of stay upright like that, as long as you don't knock it around too much. So I can imagine that having one of those with an Avenger or another one of these, you know, any sort of combination of the two would have been pretty good fun when you're young and you can imagine this stuff. And I was chuckling when I looked at the front of the box when it says pew pew on it at the front, because of course we all use pew pew in the sort of any sort of shooty context now. And this was a classic example of what I've decided to call invisi-pew, because you can't see where the beams are going to fire. You've just got to use your imagination and try and line them up as best you can and make your shot. So any sort of, sort of shooty effects are purely generated by your head, which I quite enjoy, because that was the sort of thing you do when you're little. You just make stuff up in your head, and that's part of the fun of it. So I imagine this was a lot cheaper to produce than the Space Avenger. Still bits you could lose and break and so on. So I've done, again, I think I've done quite well to actually have most of the bits of one just from a random eBay auction. So I'm well pleased with it for what I didn't have to spend on it. And again, it's a good sized toy to play with. You know, if I was little again, then that would seem really quite big to me. And in fact, I mean, the Avenger itself is actually very large. So when I do my overall comparison video, you'll get a sense of the overall sizes of them compared to each other and so on. And I'll just sort of have a look at it, and I'll find myself another big rectangular 9-volt battery and see if I can plug them all in and have them have a fight if they'll actually play ball like that. I don't know how good their electronics really are. So I'm not really sure what I'm expecting to get out of it in terms of actual playability from them, but I'll give it a go. The fact that they're alive at all after 40 years is just mind-boggling. So I mean, you've got to give Milton Bradley kudos for designing toys that were tough enough to actually stand the test of time. A lot of them these days probably wouldn't have done. So yeah, fair dues to them. So that's that is the Starbird Space Intruder. And as I say, I'm waiting now just for the original Starbird to rock up from Germany, no less. And I will then do a sort of across the board look at all of them. And there's still no backstory. I actually opened the operator's manual thinking that perhaps I'd missed something back in the day. But whilst it is a very, very helpful operator's manual that gives you all this sort of useful instruction about how to put everything together, and calls everything by strange names, which you've got to figure out what they mean by them. So energy module and front hull assemblies, you've got to kind of figure out which bit the energy module is and all that sort of good stuff. But anyway, so yeah, it does work. It is all quite self-explanatory, but there is no backstory at all. I get the feeling that somebody had a backstory in mind, because they do actually describe the Space Avenger as a flagship as well. But this one is supposed to be a space raider as well, and there's another configuration for it where you take this this sort of covering off, and then that reveals the sort of little electronic element of it, and then that flies around as a separate ship. If you look at if you pause the video on the back of this box and zoom in, you'll see it. But as I say, I'll run through it all in a more sort of comprehensive video, so you can see what they all look like alongside each other. But yeah, so that's that, I think, for this particular video. But I hope you've enjoyed that little trip down memory lane, and I'll see how many people remember this one on Reddit. So cheers for now.